Discover the incredible truth. 7 transformative actions that lead to unexpected success. Every dawn cascaded through the smudged windows of the small diner in Maplewood. But for Sarah, the light felt more like a burden than a blessing. Her exhausted body slipped into those worn-out shoes, her only armor against another day of labor. What if this is all there is? The thought flickered, a ghost lurking in the corners of her mind, alongside the heavy weight of her father's unfulfilled dreams. As she poured coffee into cracked mugs, each drop was a drip of unrelenting pressure, the echoes of her father's aspirations ricocheting through her thoughts. Teach Sarah. Become something more than this, but what is more? The evening air hung thick with the smells of takeout and the remnants of an exhausting day as Jason, her determined, intelligent son, leaned over the kitchen table. His schoolbooks sprawled across in a frenzy, a testament to both his ambition and her worry. Each moment spent watching him study tugged at her heart, infusing pride with an undercurrent of desperation. What could she sacrifice next? Often, her dreams felt like a distant whisper, muffled beneath the reality of economic instability. The diner, with its peeling linoleum and faded photographs of families moving on, felt like a prison shackling not just her but also Jason's future. Then came the fateful conversation with Mr. Thompson, a retired professor whose presence arrived like a picturesque sunset amidst her stormy life. Their lively exchange sparked a flicker of inspiration, igniting a desire she thought was long extinguished. "You have a gift with mathematics, Sarah," he said, his eyes piercing through her haze of self-doubt. She felt suffocated by doubt and, for a moment, an ember of hope burned brightly. Could she dare reach for something more? The thrill of that possibility surged within, yet an unsettling uneasiness crept back in. What would her friends and neighbors think? "You're forgetting where you came from," they would say. Was she? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With each passing week, as she balanced her job and the weight of Jason's future on her shoulders, an unsettling realization surfaced. The sabotage from her former employer rumbled through her like an unexpected storm. Their whispers clawed at her sanity, overshadowing every glimmer of ambition with treacherous intent. She stood at that proverbial fork in the road, the anticipation of her acceptance letter gripped in her trembling hands. The air felt thick and pulsing with her uncertainty. Who was she to dream? With a life of servitude stretched behind her, could she really step into the shoes of a teacher? The chilly air bit at her skin, an unwelcome reminder of the frigid waters she teetered over. As she prepared to make a choice, an internal war raged. Fear mounted amidst the desires for something greater. Would she turn back to comfort, or step into the unknown for Jason's sake? A swell of emotion left her almost gasping, her heart a quagmire of hope and dread. What if she failed him? Standing there in the fading glow of the evening, the familiar contours of Maplewood loomed like ghosts of missed opportunities, and Sarah realized the real test was just beginning. The silence of the night enveloped Sarah like a heavy blanket, its oppressive weight forcing her to confront the turmoil swirling inside. She curled up in the old armchair, the fabric frayed and faded, an echo of her own quiet demise. In the solitude, thoughts churned like a storm. How many nights had she told herself to stay in her comfort zone? Yet, as she watched the shadows dance on the walls, another part of her longed to break free, to step beyond the boundaries that had defined her existence. The next morning brought a strange clarity as she prepared for her shift at the diner. Each clink of dishes resonated with a newfound determination. She flipped the sign to open as the familiar faces trickled in, but rather than the mundane chatter and routine motions, she felt a spark crackle through her. What if this was the moment she decided to change? The thought sent a jolt of electricity through her veins. What if she started to teach? Jason's laughter filled the kitchen moments later, a sound that used to make her smile but now, It struck her like an anchor keeping her tethered to this life she longed to escape. "Mom, you look different today," he remarked, his brow furrowing as he stacked his books. "I guess I'm just tired," she replied, but the words felt hollow. It wasn't fatigue that plagued her. It was uncertainty. "Hey, do you believe in following your dreams?" she asked, testing the waters of her own aspirations. "Of course. You always tell me to chase mine." He paused, searching her face. "Why? What's yours?" Their eyes met, and for a second, she felt as if he could see through her defenses. "I want to teach," she admitted, the weight of the words hanging in the air between them. "Then do it. You're amazing at math. I've seen you explain things to me." His enthusiasm sparked something deep within her, a flicker of belief smoldering against the shadows of doubt. But the outside world intruded, distracted by the clamor of the diner. She stepped back, heart racing. Could it be that easy? The thought of pursuing her teaching credential felt absurd when compared to the lives of those around her, entrenched in their ordinary paths. The whispers of her former employer hovered like a sinister fog, reminding her that she had been underestimated. She made the decision to take action, presented by the vision of Mr. Thompson glowing in her memory. Drawing on every ounce of strength, she scrabbled together a plan. She would visit the local community college, gather information on the necessary courses, and begin to rebuild her shattered confidence. But a voice within mocked her. Who was she to think she could change? It echoed incessantly, the ghosts of past failures whispering harshly, "You belong here, in Maplewood." Yet as the day wore on and she balanced plates and poured coffee, an inkling of resolve unfurled within her. That haunting question, what if this was all there was, had shifted. Now it swirled in her mind with burgeoning confidence. What if she stepped beyond the diner's walls? What if she chased that wild spark of ambition, transformed it, and brought it to life? As she glanced around at the regulars gathered in booths, laughter ringing and conversations flowing, something clicked. It wouldn't be just about her anymore. It would be about giving Jason the example of resilience, the lesson of courage to pursue dreams, no matter the odds. That evening, the diner closed, and she stood alone in the flickering fluorescent lights, her heart racing. As she closed her eyes for a moment, ready to make the leap, a thought sliced through the haze. Where would she find the faith to lift her son and herself into the light? The realization hit hard as she whispered into the darkness of her own fear. This was just the beginning of an uphill battle. The real question loomed large now. How far was she willing to go to seize her future? Her answer would determine everything. The moment of reckoning was fast approaching. Could she confront the very fears that had held her captive for far too long? The morning sun seeped through the diner's windows, casting warm rays that danced across the worn linoleum tiles. Sarah stood behind the counter, filling coffee cups and gathering orders, while her mind wandered back to her conversation with Jason. The words he had spoken echoed in her mind, igniting a fire within her she hadn't felt in years. What if she really did have the potential to teach? But as the coffee brewed and the day began, self-doubt wormed its way in, whispering reminders of her past failures. With each passing moment, the pressure mounted. She needed to act. One day of courage couldn't be enough. It had to be a commitment. Determined to break the cycle that had suppressed her for so long, Sarah resolved to visit the community college. Her heart thudded loudly in her chest, each beat a reminder of the magnitude of this yet-to-be-taken step. The diner felt suffocating that afternoon as a lull descended just before the lunch rush. Sarah wiped the counter, taking a deep breath as she imagined her future. For the first time, the thought didn't terrify her. It exhilarated her. She had enjoyed mathematics as a child, lost hours in its rigid structures and fluid possibilities. The prospect of sharing that passion with students felt like a way to reclaim parts of herself long since buried. As the clock ticked closer to dismissal, she felt herself pacing behind the counter, restless and anxious. Jason's excitement still lingered, and she had shared the thought of teaching with him. Now, she needed to be the example she expected him to follow. But what if she actually failed? What if teaching turned into another chapter of regret? In that moment of doubt, Sarah's gaze flicked toward the door. A young boy and his father entered, causing the bell to jingle cheerfully overhead. The boy's energy filled the space, but what caught her attention was how the man patiently engaged his son, guiding him about choices and consequences as they examined the menu. The simple yet profound connection was a lesson in that very moment. This was her opportunity to foster the same connection, to empower others in the way she had failed to empower herself. As the day progressed and customers streamed in, Sarah used the bits of downtime to jot notes on napkins, crafting a rough outline of what her teaching philosophy might look like. The act of writing grounded her in a way she hadn't anticipated. She was formulating a plan, envisioning herself not just as a person behind a counter, but as an educator shaping minds, lifting spirits. The evening crept in, and she stood in the stillness of the diner once more, her heart racing not from fear, but from the exhilaration of newfound purpose. She had made a promise to herself, a commitment to pursue her dreams despite the cacophony of past failures and fears. There would be no more retreat into shadows. She would walk into the light, step by step. But as she prepared to leave for the night, something nagged at her. Thoughts of how she would present herself to the enrollment office, confront the administrators, and justify her desire weighed her down. Could she really do this? The imagination of their skepticism twisted in her gut, pulling back at the confidence she had just begun to cultivate. As she stepped out into the cool evening air, she paused, taking a deep breath. The clamor of the diner faded behind her, and she faced the unknown. The real question crystallized into focus. What would it take to silence those lingering doubts? In that moment, determination coiled tightly within her, stronger than any hesitation. She was ready to wrestle with her fears, to face not just the enrollment forms but the ghosts of her past. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of her journey, and the stakes had never been clearer. The time had come to decide whether she would conquer her past for good or let it define her. And so she stepped forward with resolution, intent on confronting that very decision head-on. But as her foot hit the pavement and her determination solidified, she wondered, where would this newfound pursuit of happiness truly take her? The next morning arrived with an air of potential that resonated through every fiber of Sarah's being. While the sun's rays shimmered across the quiet street, illuminating pathways previously shrouded in uncertainty, she felt a magnetic pull drawing her to the community college. Each step she took felt like a promise to herself, a vow that today would be different. Still, the immense weight of her decision began to materialize in the form of crippling anxiety. As she stood before the polished glass doors of the college, she hesitated. The corridor echoed with laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the solitude she often found in the diner. What if they saw through her facade? What if they recognized her insecurity and deemed her unworthy? She could almost hear whispered doubts from her mind, voices of those who had doubted her capability before. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the door handle, pushing her way into that vibrant world. The sounds of life enveloped her, filling the space she had once allowed doubt to occupy. She approached the enrollment office, each footstep a mixture of trepidation and resolve. As she stood in line, she felt adrenaline coursing through her veins. It was now or never. When her turn came, Sarah found herself before a stern-looking administrator seated behind a sturdy oak desk. The woman's gaze swept over Sarah, scrutinizing her as if determining her worth in a single glance. A slight tremor rippled through Sarah as she cleared her throat, bracing herself for the words she hoped would articulate her dream. "I want to enroll in the education program," she stated, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. The administrator's eyebrows rose in apparent amusement. "And what makes you think that you can teach? This isn't something everyone can do, you know?" Fire ignited within Sarah. Instead of retreating or dwelling on self-doubt, she launched into her carefully crafted philosophy on education and empowerment. She shared her belief in the transformative power of connection, the importance of guiding students through their struggles, and her own passion for mathematics. As she spoke, Sarah felt the weight of self-doubt being replaced by clarity and conviction. She could see the administrator's demeanor shift slightly, a glimmer of interest breaking through the initial skepticism. For the first time in ages, she was not merely an observer of her life, she was actively participating, changing the narrative. The administrator leaned back in her chair, regarding Sarah with a mix of professionalism and newfound respect. "You have clearly given this a lot of thought," she said, scribbling notes. "But you must also understand that teaching requires resilience. Are you prepared for that?" "More than you know," Sarah responded, her voice unwavering. It was as if her journey had forged a new layer of strength, one she was only beginning to understand. With a signature and a few forms later, she walked away from the enrollment office with her head held high. A flood of exhilaration washed over her. She had taken a leap of faith and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably empowered as days turned to weeks, with classes unfolding around her. The energy in the academic environment sparked with inspiration. She reveled in the fluctuating dynamics of education, the ebb and flow of collaboration and learning. Conversations with instructors filled her with a sense of purpose, a constant reminder that she was actively crafting her own story. However, as she delved deeper into her studies, cracks started to surface in her newfound confidence. Balancing coursework and her obligations at the diner tested her limits and drained her energy. Each late night spent studying felt like a price to pay for her dream, but exhaustion threatened to dismantle the resolve she had built. The flickering shadows of her past failure loomed, whispering insidious reminders that success might still be just out of reach. As she pondered how to navigate this impending strain, she received an unexpected email about an upcoming teaching demonstration opportunity, a chance to showcase her learning and win a scholarship. The moment of reckoning approached. This could be her chance to prove not only to others but to herself that she belonged in this world. Would she step into the ring and take on the challenge, or let fear sideline her once more? Pacing in her small apartment later that night, she realized she didn't just need to prepare for a demonstration. She needed to confront the fear that had held her back for too long. The excitement stirred within her, raw and potent, a chance to claim her narrative. Emboldened by her conviction, Sarah faced the flickering shadows and prepared for the moment that could define her future. Would she seize her opportunity, or would hesitation tether her once again to her past? The day of the teaching demonstration loomed closer, casting long shadows that danced mockingly beneath the fluorescent lights of Sarah's small kitchen. A single candle flickered on the table, its flickering flames a stark reminder of her internal struggle. Each day, the anxiety mounted, often paralyzing her with the weight of expectation. Yet this was no time for weakness. She had to transform that anxiety into fuel. She spread out her notes, tracing her finger along the carefully constructed lesson plan. Ideas flowed from her mind to the paper. She had invested so much in this moment. This wasn't just a demonstration. This was a chance for her to carve her place in the world. But uncertainty clung to her like a damp fog, whispering that perhaps her best wouldn't be enough. After taking a deep breath, Sarah reminded herself of the conviction she had felt in the enrollment office. She had spoken passionately about education, empathy, and mathematics. So why should this be any different? Her mountain of self-doubt began to feel like an insurmountable challenge, but with each hour spent preparing, she started to discover not just the outlines of her lesson, but the very core of her teaching philosophy. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting a warm glow in her living room, Sarah spent time visualizing her classroom. Imagining the faces of students, some eager, some reluctant, she imagined herself guiding them to moments of realization and connection. Teaching was, after all, a performance, and she was the lead actress in an unfolding narrative that could potentially change lives, including her own. On the last evening before the demonstration, during a late-night shift at the diner, Sarah watched the way the regulars interacted, how her colleagues managed their daily routines. The spirited conversations and the subtle art of persuasion in customer service reminded her of verbal engagement. There was power in connection, and teaching was not far removed from engaging effectively with individuals. Wasn't this the essence of education? But fatigue tugged at her once more, tightening its grip after yet another long shift. As she leaned against the counter, she felt the familiar swirl of doubt wrapping around her, stifling her excitement. Would she be able to muster the energy to throw herself into that classroom and capture her audience? That night, sleep proved elusive as she tossed and turned, her mind racing through her lesson plans. The shadows of her past failures crept in, voices whispering insidiously of how she'd never measure up. Yet, amidst that cacophony, flickers of something else stirred a realization crystallizing in her mind. She could not change her past, but she could craft her future. Each moment of uncertainty was a lesson in resilience. She could choose to see her challenges as opportunities for growth rather than confirmation of inadequacy. With this newfound awareness, her confidence flickered back to life. The morning of the demonstration arrived with a sense of urgency, the sunlight piercing through the curtains, illuminating her determination. As she dressed with care, she made a promise to herself. No matter how it played out, she would own her narrative. The fear wouldn't define her. She would step into that classroom as a person transformed. Arriving at the college, she inhaled sharply, feeling the palpable energy of those who, like her, were all trying to prove themselves. This was at the moment of truth where she needed to confront not just the audience, but the voice of her inner critic. As she approached the classroom, her heart raced, but her feet remained steady. She was not merely presenting. She was ready to engage in a conversation about learning, a dialogue of encouragement. But just as she steadied herself, a familiar face from her past unexpectedly entered the classroom, a former schoolmate, someone who had been part of her earlier insecurities. The stakes surged, thickening the air around her. Would this encounter throw her off balance, or could she lean into her preparation and the strength she had begun to cultivate? In that moment, the scales tipped and she understood. This was not just about winning a scholarship or impressing her peers. It was about reclaiming her narrative, her confidence, and possibly even redefining her future. Would she rise to the occasion and show everyone, including herself, what she was truly capable of? The room fell silent as she prepared to begin. The only question that lingered now was whether she could capture this fleeting moment, or if self-doubt would once again threaten to pull her under. The silence in the classroom seemed almost oppressive, forcing Sarah to confront the deflated confidence that had ballooned only minutes before. She could feel her heart pounding in tandem with her racing thoughts, each beat ricocheting off her insecurities. Still, she took a step forward, grounding herself in the present moment. Engaging with her audience was no longer just an act. It was a pact she made with herself. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. With every word she spoke, she sought to project the excitement she felt inside about mathematics, transforming her anxiety into palpable energy. As she began the lesson, she made eye contact, drawing in a reluctant student, a faint smile exchanging acknowledgement of their shared tension. Sarah launched into her carefully crafted lecture, but with each passing minute, she realized that her lesson would not unfold as planned. The questions came not the easy ones that fell in line with her notes, but ones that forced her to think on her feet and pivot her approach. It was uncomfortable, like standing at the edge of a diving board, contemplating the plunge without knowing the water's depth. Yet somehow, each inquiry felt like a lifeline, challenging her to dig deeper and connect her philosophy of teaching to real-time student needs. As hands shot up around the room, she began to embrace the spontaneity of the moment. Time seemed to stand still as she deftly navigated their curiosities. "What if we approached this problem from another angle?" she asked, seeking not just to answer but to involve every student in the exploration of knowledge. As she encouraged dialogue, her own self-doubt began to dissipate, revealing the teacher she had envisioned herself becoming. Her nervousness transformed into excitement, the initial tremor in her voice replaced by warmth and authority. Sarah could sense her audience leaning in, engaging with her lesson in a way she had only ever dreamed about. But just as she was beginning to find her rhythm, she caught sight of the former schoolmate again, seated toward the back. A pang of anxiety shot through her, their shared past a heavy reminder of her struggles. The memory of feeling invisible among peers re-emerged, the feeling that she was merely playing a role, but she quickly shook it off. Mathematics is not just about numbers. It's a language of reasoning, Sarah emphasized, her passion evident. Judging by the nods around the room, she was making connections that were sparking interest. Yet, there remained an aching vulnerability, an underlying question of whether she would ever fully escape the shadows of her past. Deep down, she realized this demonstration wasn't solely about how she performed today, but how each moment of doubt had served to cultivate her resilience. She became aware that teaching extended beyond curriculum. It was about vulnerability, authenticity, and dare she admitted her own healing through connection. As the class drew to a close, she faced them all, her heart still racing, but now with exhilaration. I want you to remember that every moment you feel challenged is a testament to your potential. We all start somewhere, and the journey is what shapes us. The words slipped out, an offering of hope, and she could feel her sincerity transform the air in the room, each student responding with a renewed sense of possibility as the bell rang, signaling the end of her demonstration. Applause erupted, yet she barely registered it, her mind racing with possibilities. Had she truly reached them, or had she only flirted with that connection? As she gathered her things, Sarah's thoughts swirled, and she felt a renewed urge to explore what this new understanding of teaching could mean for her life. Her gaze met the familiar face, now smiling, and without thinking, she approached. Would this former schoolmate be someone who could help her confront the lingering doubts still shadowing her path? The story of her journey had only just begun. What challenges awaited as she stepped out of that classroom and into the world of teaching? As Sarah stepped out of the classroom, a heavy awareness settled within her. The commotion of students filing past seemed distant, their chatter reduced to mere background noise. She clutched her lesson plans, her heart still pounding with exhilaration, though shadows of doubt began to crawl back into her mind. What if the connection she felt was only transient? Could she replicate that spark in her future classes? She paused in the hallway, leaning against the cool locker bank for support. The adrenaline of her successful demonstration ebbed, allowing a flood of self-reflection to wash over her. Perhaps teaching was not just a matter of mastering the concepts but also about wrestling with her insecurities, forever attempting to refine her voice. In that moment, she understood that each class would be a new battle, a dance between her vision of herself and the insecurities that taunted her. Drawing a deep breath, she recalled the smiles from her students. Their engagement had felt genuine. It dawned on her that she had allowed herself to be vulnerable, to look beyond her fears and truly connect. Yet, the specter of her former schoolmate loomed, a reminder of the permanence of self-doubt. Would that shadow always follow her? "Hey, Sarah," came a voice from behind her, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Emily, her former classmate. The warmth in Emily's expression sent a small jolt of anxiety coursing through Sarah. She had decided to approach Emily. Perhaps now would be the time for a conversation that could reveal more about herself than she had previously uncovered. "Could I talk to you for a moment?" Sarah asked, her voice slightly quivering. It was far more invasive to confront her feelings than she had anticipated. "Of course. I was really impressed with your lesson today," Emily said, taking a step closer. "You seem so different from back in school." A smile flickered on Sarah's lips, yet it felt bittersweet. "I still struggle, finding my footing," she confessed. "You seemed completely in control up there," Emily reassured her. "I think many of us wished we had a teacher like you." The compliment sank in, battling with her internal monologue of doubt. Yet, the sincerity in Emily's eyes ignited something within her. "Thank you," Sarah replied, hesitating before pressing further. "Can I ask you, how have you managed to exceed expectations since then? It always felt like I was always falling behind." Emily's gaze softened as she considered the question. "I had to reframe my failures as lessons, rather than signs of my inability." Sounds cheesy, but it's true. And sometimes I still falter, just like everyone else. "But how do you maintain that perspective?" Sarah asked. "That's the thing, it's a process. I'm constantly reshaping my narrative. Every challenge is a step, not a dead end. You have to be willing to fail to grow." As Sarah listened, absorbing Emily's words, she couldn't help but wonder. How far would she be willing to stretch her own narrative? Could she learn to embrace failure as Emily had? Stepping into the unknown excited her, even amid that undercurrent of fear. Returning home, Sarah began strategizing for the next day. What if she crafted an environment where failure was not an obstacle, but a foundational building block? She jotted notes, each idea reflecting the resilience she hoped to instill in her students. The questions still buzzed, each buzzing louder than the last. Could she risk vulnerability further? How much would this shift in mindset test her as an educator? As night descended, she understood that each decision breathed life into a new persona she longed to cultivate. But amidst the chaos of thoughts, one nagging idea began to surface. Was she prepared to confront the real challenge ahead, the distance between who she was and who she aspired to become? With those doubts lingering, Sarah closed her notebook, determination mingling with uncertainty. Tomorrow promised new opportunities and their accompanying challenges. It was time to decide, was she ready to face whatever lay ahead? Sarah awoke the next morning with the sunlight streaming through her window, filtering through the curtains and casting gentle patterns on her walls. It was a new day, another chance to embody the educator she envisioned. Yet, the familiar gnaw of anxiety clenched at her stomach as she prepared for school. This time, she would not just lecture. She would invite her students into a collaborative space, a community of learners who thrived on exploration. A vision slowly formed in her mind. What if each lesson was not merely a transmission of knowledge but a journey of discovery, framed around the possibility of failure as a necessary step to understanding? Sarah felt a spark of energy as she fastened her shoes, her pulse quickening at the thought. Arriving at school, Sarah walked into her classroom feeling more centered. Today, she had planned a hands-on science experiment, allowing students to probe and pry apart concepts through trial and error. Her heart fluttered with a blend of fear and exhilaration. She was stepping outside her comfort zone, letting go of rigid expectations. As the bell rang, students shuffled in, their expressions mirroring a mixture of curiosity and indifference. She took a breath, anchoring herself to the resolve they had built together the day before. After a brief introduction, Sarah laid out the experiment and explained its objectives. Their eyes widened with intrigue. Soon, they were engaged in deep discussions, each group navigating challenges. A burst of energy filled the room, an undercurrent of excitement mingling with the occasional disappointment that erupted when plans went awry. Sarah observed as her students unsolved problems with laughter and frustration, recognizing that they were growing right in front of her eyes. But for Sarah, the more profound challenge remained internal. As she waded through a conversation with a student struggling to find clarity in the project, feelings of doubt resurfaced. Was she truly capable of guiding them? Each struggling voice echoed her inner critic. Just as she was about to falter, she recalled Emily's words: failure was a stepping stone, not a dead end. She focused on her breathing, recalibrating her mind. Pushing through her uncertainty, Sarah leaned in closer to the group. What if you thought about this differently? What other variables could you introduce to see if that changes your results? The question sparked renewed energy as students reevaluated their experiments. In that moment, she felt an unshakable bond form, a connection built upon vulnerability and shared experience. As the class period wound down, Sarah realized something significant. Each stumble her students faced mirrored her own struggles. Their resilience was cultivating a new perspective for her as well. She was not just their teacher. She was a fellow learner alongside them, breaking the barriers of authority and expectations in pursuit of mutual growth. After the last bell, Sarah remained behind, still buzzing from the day's experiences. She was energized by the possibility that each misstep was an opportunity for insight, not a reason for retreat. Yet, questions lingered. How could she further evolve this approach? Would the reluctance to embrace failure still linger at the back of her mind like a stubborn shadow? What if, despite her intentions, some students still clung to traditional expectations? Determined to foster an environment of open dialogue, she resolved to introduce a feedback wall in the classroom, a collaborative space for students to voice their thoughts on what they learned and how they felt about the process itself. This would be their shared canvas of growth, though the thought of potential criticism stung. As she sketched ideas in her notebook, empowerment and trepidation coalesced within her. Tomorrow would test her resolve yet again. Would she be ready to embrace this new wave of vulnerability in front of her students? The push-pull of fear and ambition gnawed at her. With the sun finally setting outside her window, Sarah closed her notebook and reflected on all that had transpired. She realized it was just a beginning and that the journey ahead wouldn't simply require courage, it would demand resilience, openness, and continual self-discovery. And so she asked herself, was she ready for the next challenge on this unpredictable path of growth? Would she embrace an even deeper vulnerability that would redefine not just her teaching, but also who she was becoming? Sarah stood in front of her classroom the next day, a palpable energy swirling around her, a stark contrast to the anxiety she had felt before. The feedback wall, now adorned with colorful sticky notes reflecting her students' thoughts, glowed with a vibrancy only emerging from their collective voices. They had tied their experiences together, revealing a tapestry of insight that echoed lessons beyond textbook pages. Yet, as she surveyed the room, she felt doubt creeping back through the seams of her resolve. Would they truly embrace this new norm? Would that wall of vulnerability become a place of honesty, or a canvas for criticism cloaked in anonymity? The questions thrummed relentlessly in her mind that as students settled into their seats, Sarah recognized that this lesson was as much about her growth as theirs. She had been collecting her own reflections all week, uncovering layers of how fear had stripped her of her confidence. Now, she craved authenticity not just from them, but from herself. Determined, she began the class with an open heart. Today, she explained, we'll turn to our feedback wall. I want to hear from you about yesterday's experiment. What did you learn, and how can we build on that together? She took the initiative, articulating her own struggles with uncertainty as she paced the room, her presence strengthening with each word. As a few hands shot up, she sensed a shift in the classroom atmosphere, a willingness to engage. The first student voiced their struggles with a variable they couldn't control, and in the midst of their confession, Sarah heard her own voice echoing from within. Part of her wanted to guide the discussion back onto safe ground, controlling the narrative to shield her from any discomfort. But she knew that wouldn't serve anyone. Would she allow herself to remain uncomfortable? Let us break it down, she said, deciding to challenge her own instinct. What were the factors you felt could influence the results negatively? And how might you approach it differently next time? The discussion grew decadent, notes of anxiety replaced by palpable curiosity. Each student's hesitance melted away into collaboration. They bounced ideas off one another, navigating unfamiliar territory while she watched in awe. Her doubts about her guidance softened as she realized the transformative power of vulnerability. They were all on this winding road together. Yet, amidst the momentum, a sinking feeling began to materialize. Daisy, a perceptive student with a penchant for perfectionism, sat quietly, her brows furrowed in contemplation. Sarah felt a familiar pang of concern for Daisy, who had previously expressed her fear of making mistakes, a sentiment that resonated with Sarah's own struggles. Confronting her own shadow, she recognized that fostering resilience in students like Daisy would require direct engagement with her deeper challenges too. Taking a breath, Sarah walked over to Daisy, kneeling beside her desk. I can see you're deep in thought. What's on your mind? Though her heart raced, she grounded herself in sincerity. Daisy glanced up, her lips turning slightly downwards. I don't think I learned anything yesterday, but what not to do, I just want to know the right answer. Instead of retreating into her educator facade, Sarah steadied herself against the tug of fear. What if right answers weren't what we aimed for? What if this journey was about exploration together? Can we turn our mistakes into a powerful lesson? The room felt thick with tension as Daisy considered this. Sarah held her breath, the gravity of the moment pressing down. It had become clear. Sarah's own journey of accepting failure was now intricately connected to helping her students navigate theirs. This was her crucible, a moment that could either paralyze them all in doubt or propel them forward into a richer understanding. As the bell rang, a wave of realization washed over Sarah. She had unlocked a pivotal moment in her own teaching where she wouldn't just be imparting knowledge, but co-piloting a voyage into vulnerability and growth. Yet, she also understood that the deeper challenge lay ahead. Could she cultivate that same fearlessness in Daisy, in herself, and in all her students? Would they champion exploration over expectation in a world that often labeled mistakes as failures? Tomorrow's lesson would demand all of this and more. Feeling the weight of uncertainty mixed with a flicker of hope, Sarah left the classroom with a question seared into her consciousness. What would she find on the other side of this commitment to deep, transformative learning? As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself immersed in a journey she never anticipated. The vulnerability she had embraced not only carved new pathways in her teaching style, but also illuminated aspects of her life that had long remained shadowed. Her classroom had transformed into a haven where exploration thrived and mistakes were championed as stepping stones to understanding. Each lesson grew richer, and her students flourished in this environment of acceptance. Daisy, once reticent and fixated on perfection, began to experiment boldly, sharing her insights with peers. Mirroring Daisy's evolution, Sarah experienced a profound awakening within herself, the realization that she was not merely a teacher, but a perpetual learner entwined in each student's narrative. This solidarity became her anchor, fostering a sense of purpose that resonated deeply. Recognition came swiftly in the form of student feedback. As the semester progressed, evaluations highlighted Sarah's authenticity and engagement. The feedback wall, vibrant with reflections and encouragement, transformed her perception of success. It became clear that teaching was more than transferring knowledge. It was a tapestry woven from shared experiences, channeling the essence of learning into an expansive journey rather than a destination. Yet with each sign of progress came questions that nudged at her old fears, manifesting in the form of academic challenges. Balancing the rigors of her studies while ensuring her classroom remained a dynamic environment felt daunting. Sarah found herself wrestling with the dual pressures of maintaining her commitment to her students while striving to reach her academic goals. Each night was a battle against exhaustion, but with newfound clarity, she recognized that she was shaping her identity through resilience. One particular day, an opportunity arose that would test both her commitment to her students and her personal growth. The administration announced a teaching award for innovative engagement, inviting submissions that showcased unique educational approaches. Sarah's pulse quickened at the prospect. This was her moment, and the stakes felt extraordinarily high. It was no longer just about achieving academic accolades but solidifying her role as a confident teacher and embracing her narrative fully. Realizing this needed to be a collaborative effort, she invited her students to participate in the process, weaving their voices into the fabric of her submission. They bounced ideas off one another, their excitement illuminating the room. "Let us highlight how we tackled mistakes together," suggested Daisy, her enthusiasm infectious. "Absolutely. We should showcase our feedback wall as a symbol of our growth," Sarah added, a rush of excitement threading through her. It was a pivotal moment. They were crafting a submission that broadcasted resilience instead of perfection. As they worked together, Sarah's confidence soared. With each student-owned project and contribution of feedback, she documented their journey and her own evolution. They encapsulated the very essence of learning, a continuous river, not a stagnant pond. She harnessed the voices of her students, framing the narrative of their shared experiences. On the day of submission, Sarah stood in front of her students, a mixture of anticipation and pride swelling in her chest. The acknowledgement of her efforts as a teacher had come full circle, resonating through her relationships and philosophies. Their collaborative effort had not just strengthened her as an educator. It had solidified her resolve to embody the change she wished to see. When the award date arrived, and the winner was announced, her heart raced. As they called her name, an electrifying rush surged through her. Applause erupted, enveloping her in warmth and validation. This was the culmination of months, a testament to her perseverance, her refusal to be bound by previous experiences. Standing there on stage, Sarah recognized her transformation. She had conquered her doubts, navigated vulnerability, and forged meaningful connections with her students. That moment felt monumental as joy and fulfillment radiated from within, profoundly reshaping how she viewed her journey. Sarah had emerged as a confident educator, known for her courage and dedication to learning not just for herself, but for her students. As she gazed at her class, their pride mirrored her own. This was the essence of true achievement. Not just winning the award, but realizing that success was cultivated through the journey, propelling forward together. With renewed conviction, she embraced the future ahead. The path of education would always hold challenges, but her story now reflected resilience, personal growth, and a commitment to nurturing community through learning. Today was just the beginning, and she would not just teach. She would inspire. This is the moment to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.